Donald Trump hosting racing car drivers at a NASCAR event in the Rose Garden, taking questions from the press, the majority of them about the tariff developments today. A fast-moving afternoon at the White House. It all started emerging at around 6 o'clock our time. A 90-day tariff pause for all countries except China. Markets surging on the back of that announcement. China will now be subjected to levies of 125% because the president said of the lack of respect that China has shown to the world's markets. All other countries, we understand, are now going to be subjected to a universal tariff of 10%. The president saying this is a reward to those countries for not retaliating. The White House saying this is all effective immediately. The president was asked a question by one of the reporters there about a deal with the EU. The president saying a deal could be made with everyone, including the EU and including China. He just wants fair deals. Let's bring in Sky's US correspondent James Matthews, who's at the White House for us. And of course, the president there in front of a lot of cars, and there are so many implications for car manufacturers and motoring industry with these changing US tariffs. What have you made of these developments this evening? Because I said unexpected and fast-moving. Right, we are having problems with all sorts of microphones, but we did hear the president loud and clear just a few moments ago, answering questions about the announcements that came from the White House a little earlier today. I'm told that we have James back with us now. James, I don't know if you heard my question, but I was just saying there was a real sense of, you see the president there standing in front of lots of cars and lots of implications for car manufacturers and the motor industry with these changing US tariffs. It's been fast-moving and unexpected developments today, but, expect the unexpected when it comes to President Trump.
Yeah, you're right, Sarah-Jane. Quite the photo opportunity there, wasn't it? I wonder what the caption would be. What do you think? Handbrake turn, reverse gear, off-ramp. That, I think all the captions would fit Donald Trump's strategy in the past couple of hours. He has backed down from that robust stance, that tariffs for all, and an increasing isolation, an isolated position that drew the ire not just of people around the world, countries around the world, but also people in the United States close to him, money people who put him in the Oval Office. I was interested there that he spoke about watching an interview with Jamie Dimon. He's the CEO of JP Morgan. He was on Fox Business this morning. That's where people go to speak to Donald Trump because they know he watches that particular cable channel. Jamie Dimon said today it was likely that the United States was heading for a recession. Ally that to dire warnings from other people. Bill Ackman, the hedge fund billionaire who funded Donald Trump's campaign, he was talking about an economic nuclear winter. So in that kind of context, and remember the markets were tumbling as well, Donald Trump has taken this decision. Has he backed off? Has he backed down? I think many people will interpret it that way. The question would have to be, why have the chaos? If this was a strategy that was ultimately designed to pressure countries into queuing up to negotiate, these are countries who would have negotiated in any case without the turmoil, markets tumbling, money falling off the value of pensions around the country and causing extreme concern amongst people in Trump's inner circle. Remember Elon Musk. For several days, he's been railing against the prospect of tariffs because of how they would affect his particular business. China, you touched on it, Sarah-Jane. He mentioned China in that news conference. And the United States and China, let's be honest, are facing up for a bitter trade war. Donald Trump said that China wants to make a deal, but doesn't know how to go about it, but they will figure it out. I think the prospect of the trade war hangs heavy on the events of the past couple of hours because Donald Trump will need allies as he faces off against the Chinese. You know, countries around the world will be assessing their own positions and, you know, judging where their self-interest lies. Does it lie with a China, not a natural ally, but perhaps one that is more consistent and more predictable than a Donald Trump who seems to change his mind every day and in whom there are problems, there have to be problems of trust in assessing where he goes next and in whose interests he will act. I think that's a problem that countries have had with Trump. They will continue to have that problem with Trump as negotiations proceed. But I think the situation now is he's created a context that in which everybody can chill out, rather, and you know, use that period of calm to corral countries around him, around the United States, a natural ally, which will strengthen Donald Trump moving forward, strengthen him in a trade war, perhaps a long trade war, a long and bitter trade war with China.
A period of calm. US politics, the markets, the economy could do with that at the moment. But as you said there's a lot of negotiations going on behind the scenes. So many countries to do deals with. We had a response from number 10 off the back of the announcements from the White House today. Number 10 spokesperson saying a trade war is in nobody's interest. We don't want any tariffs at all. So for jobs and livelihoods across the UK, we will coolly and calmly continue to negotiate in Britain's interests. We're talking about so many major countries and economies globally. How long is all of this going to take? We know there are a lot of phone calls. We've seen a procession of world leaders recently going into the White House to have face-to-face meetings. What kind of period are we looking at here? Because while this continues, there's still uncertainty, even though it's a little calmer.
That's right, Sarah-Jane. I was in the New York Stock Exchange yesterday, and that was almost a microcosm of what we have seen in terms of the behaviour of the market, the confidence in where Donald Trump is taking the economy. And these markets were a reflection of that. You went in the morning, everything was green, you know, the stocks were up. Come midday, when Donald Trump increased the tariffs on China, everything turned on its head. And suddenly everything was red, stocks tumbling again. That has clearly an impact on Donald Trump, a man who uses the stock market and its performance as a metric to reflect his own performance on the economy. So he will have been embarrassed by that. But I think he will be embarrassed by the people around him, people who know what they're talking about, people who guide the economy of this country, you know, in grand style, the billionaires who have, to a large extent, actually shaped the presidency, shaped who occupies the Oval Office. These, you know, Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan, I mentioned Bill Ackman, a hedge fund billionaire who's been warning of a self-induced economic winter. That's the kind of sentiment that Donald Trump has been getting from people close to him, people that he admires, and people whose support he relies upon. He's just had this photo opportunity with racing cars. I can tell you, you'll be familiar, Sarah-Jane, with the Haas Formula One team. Well, Haas, the people who, there's a spin-off company, Haas Automation, they supply machine parts to the racing industry. They put out a statement in the past 24 hours talking about a significant impact on them and on their business of Trump's tariff policy. So that particular photo call that we've just seen, that was shaping up to be quite dark for Donald Trump because, you know, in the context of racing cars, he would have been asked the question, well, you know, you're celebrating racing cars, the racing industry. The racing industry is far from celebrating you. It's actually saying that you are a problem for them. So that was the kind of situation on a number of levels that Donald Trump was facing. And also this line about we're taking care of the Main Street, not Wall Street. That's a mantra you've heard coming out of the White House in the past 24 hours. Well, I can tell you that on Main Street, people are saying, and I know because they're saying it to me, the value of my pension has gone down 25% and more since Donald Trump took power. Prices in the grocery stores are not going down. That's what he was elected to make happen. So on all sorts of levels, his presidency and his performance was being undermined by this tariff policy. Something had to be done. The White House are spinning it as a stroke of genius, as a master plan that he is implementing, something that he had in mind all along. Others, his opponents in particular, will be asking serious, pointed questions about whether or not this is an individual who's making it up as he goes along. And the question that underpins that is, why did we get where we are right now with days of chaos, markets tumbling, serious concern about the direction of the economy? Why did that have to happen to get to this point when we could have got to this point without that trauma?
James, thank you. Of course, the Treasury Secretary earlier today saying the pause is not because of market reaction. Of course, the new tariff decision influenced the market's performance heavily and not in a positive way in recent days. However, they have surged since these new announcements have come out. In fact, the S&P 500 looking at one of its best days for decades. Let's bring you up to speed on that front. We can speak to Sky's economics and business correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan. So, Gurpreet, talk to us about the reaction over the last few hours to these announcements.
Yeah, it's perhaps fitting that Donald Trump was standing beside some racing cars because he's certainly taken us on a wild journey since Liberation Day on Wednesday, when he announced sweeping tariffs on countries across the world, and stock markets in response, they plummeted, not just in the US, but across the world, giving a clear vote of no confidence in Donald Trump's tariff policy. The fear was that this would cause economic growth to capitulate, not just in the US, but here in the UK, in China, across the world. And over the past 2 days, what we've seen is that stress in the financial markets, not just the sell-off in the stock markets, but that we've seen that stress expand, spiral outwards to other important parts of the financial markets, including the bond markets. Traders have been selling stocks, but they've also been selling US government debt, and that's been sending government borrowing costs higher, putting a lot of pressure on the US administration. It's got trillions and trillions of dollars worth of debt that it needs to refinance, and when borrowing costs go up, well, that can undo governments. And the pressure on Donald Trump was intense. Many were starting to wonder whether he would finally capitulate. And it looks like he has done, announcing that 90-day pause on retaliatory tariffs on most countries except China. And as you said, SJ, the markets, well, they immediately rebounded. The S&P 500 up 7.6%, the Dow Jones up 6.4%, the Nasdaq up 9.8%. These are the main indices in the US stock market. And the rebound was led by some of those companies who have suffered the most, like Apple, Walmart. They all soared. And we're expecting to see something similar when European markets open in the morning. There you go. You can see the Nasdaq. That's the technology-heavy indice in the US. You can just see how sharply it's rebounded, up 7.2% since that 90-day pause was announced. So, and there we've got the US 30-year Treasury yield. You can see the yo-yo journey that it's been on, with yields falling and then rising again as investors started dumping US government debt. And that was really starting to weigh on Donald Trump. And that was really the start of all of this talk about whether Donald Trump would finally have to capitulate. So we've seen some reprieve in the financial markets, SJ, and a clear sign that the president is now at least willing to listen to the messages that he's getting back. But this is not over yet. He's shown that he's volatile in his policy making. China, the world's second largest economy, is still facing crippling tariffs. That is going to have an impact on economic growth across the world. He's shown that he's a volatile character. And so there's a certain level of uncertainty that will take a while to be undone. It will take a while for that confidence to return in the markets. And of course, we still don't know what's going to happen when these 90 days are up.
Gurpreet, thank you, Gurpreet, with reaction there. Let's go straight to our chief political correspondent, John Craig. He's standing by in Westminster for us tonight. And a few moments ago, we had a response from Number 10 to the news coming out of the White House tonight. And it seems that the Prime Minister is keeping it cool and calm tonight.
Well, the message from number 10 is that the pause for those countries that have not retaliated is that it shows that cool and calm can pay off. Now, number 10 believe that there's no immediate change for the UK in terms of what the UK is facing in tariffs. The number 10 understanding is that the 25% on cars and 10% on other imports still stands. And it's the other reciprocal tariffs that are being paused. On the record, a statement from number 10, the spokesperson is saying this: a trade war is in nobody's interest. Well, we've heard that said by the PM several times in the recent days. We don't want any tariffs at all. So for jobs and livelihoods across the UK, we will coolly and calmly continue to negotiate in Britain's interest. A source has told Sky News, however, that this does, the pause on those countries that didn't retaliate does show that cool and calm can pay off. It's how the Prime Minister does business, says the source. It's the right approach. He's been urging it in all his calls this week and will continue to do so. Well, as the Prime Minister told the Liaison Committee in Parliament yesterday, there's not going to be a knee-jerk reaction. What is important is to get a trade deal, and that when they talk about being cool and calm and patient, if you like, they're not using the word patient, that's because they want a deal. However, from Trump critics in Parliament, the chief critic of President Trump, Sir Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, well, he said this is Donald Trump's Liz Truss moment, a reference to the calamitous mini-budget of a couple of years ago. He has been forced into an embarrassing climb down, says Sir Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader. Now we need to get him to go further and get rid of his remaining reckless tariffs. That means an economic coalition of the willing and uniting with our allies. Well, the Prime Minister would say he's been speaking to allies on the phone constantly in the last few days, and that his approach is paying off, as I've said. The message from number 10 is that cool and calm can pay off. It's how the Prime Minister does business.
John, thank you. John Crager with a reaction from Westminster tonight. Let's now talk to Danny Blanchflower, Professor of Economics at Dartmouth College and former member of the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee. Danny, we were only talking just the other night before we were interrupted by President Trump. He was saying something completely different when we last spoke. What have you made of what he's had to say? Because it's all change.
Well, I wrote a few words down listening to your really good reporters being absolutely spot on with this. What words did I write down? I wrote down an untrustworthy president, chaos creator, such that firms just don't know what's coming because he's changed his mind very quickly and he might change his mind again next week. But I think that, in a sense, the Ed Davey comment, that this was comparable to what Liz Truss had gone through. For the listeners, I like this. I've said this many times. Markets stop people doing stupid stuff. Right? So what I mean by that is you do something stupid and the markets will respond very rapidly, as they did with Liz Truss. And basically the stock market collapsed, the bond market collapsed, and essentially Trump had nowhere to go. But that's then going forward, the question is, can you trust the word that he says? Do you believe that the world is going to be a calmer place? No. So the cost of borrowing to the US is inevitably higher. I think Starmer's response, which was the sign of be calm, sit there, wait, is the right thing to do. But consumers around the world will say to themselves, goodness me, this is chaos. And firms will say this is chaos. So I think we've not restored ourselves back to normality. I think the prospects of a global recession, because of the craziness down to one person, which is Donald Trump, will continue. We will see, and it's great that he has turn this around. But why did we start down this road a week ago? And why are we doing this? I mean, this is like
that's a great question. Why was he trying to call other countries bluffs?
Well, perhaps so, but the markets The markets didn't. The markets didn't trust that there was a plan. The markets didn't really know where this was going, and they didn't believe him when he said this is a tax cut, when he said this is better for everybody. And basically all the economic indicators were doing exactly the opposite to what he said. So as being a leader, you know, it's a bit like the general who says charge, and he has to be sure that the troops behind him are charging. These troops said, we're not charging, we're not going along with you. So this was inevitable, and now we will obviously see what happens with China. But China's learned that he'll back off as soon as things turn against him. So I have never seen anything quite like this. I guess the only analogy you could give is Smoot and Hawley, but Smoot and Hawley in the 30s didn't turn around. So U-turn Trump. That's the new way to think. U-turn Trump. Thank goodness.
He's not going to like that name, is he? Do you think essentially this is?
Stick, I'm sure.
Do you think this has essentially weakened his position with China? Because when you look at the facts, China now subjected to levies of 125%. Is there any chance that Donald Trump can win a trade war with America? Because that's what that kind of statement is saying.
Well, obviously what they've just seen is he's backed off. When things get tough, he's backed off. China's a big place. I mean, the question is, what bargaining power do they have? And they've seen him go a run-in. They've seen him do a U-turn. So I don't know. I mean, but the idea we'll have a global trade war is just nonsense. Now, to say we paused it for 90 days, that's good. But if you're sitting, as I used to do at the Bank of England, you're going to say to yourself, well, this is not good news for the British economy. The prospect that firms will hunker down and be worried about investing. Jaguar Land Rover said, we're not going to send cars to America. This has just imposed huge amounts of uncertainty. Firms aren't going to start investing. They're not going to be hiring people. So I think Starmer's response is right. Sit, watch and wait. And the Bank of England's probably going to have to say to itself, well, we're going to have to act here because there's a big risk to consumers here. But this is an astonishing day. Absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And, you know, just a few days ago when we spoke last, I mean, I can't even remember, was it 48 hours ago? We talked about global recession. There was that real fear, wasn't there, of a global recession. Where do you think we stand now? Because it's so unpredictable. That fear is not going to go away overnight.
No,
but do you think that's actually got through to Donald Trump?
Yeah, well said. I mean, obviously, what we were seeing were indicators that global recession was coming. JP Morgan and all sorts of people, as your reporters were saying, were arguing that there was a very significant chance of recession. That hasn't receded because of great uncertainty. Think about a consumer. You say to yourself, well, I was about to go and buy a house. Are you going to go and buy that house knowing how things are going? Well, you're probably not. You probably should say to yourself, well, I'm going to hold back on this. I'm going to hold back investing.
Yeah, it's not just the tariffs that are on pause as of now.
Yeah, I mean, the sensible advice that I would give to people is, I don't know what's coming. Let's wait and see, and follow what Starmer said. Be calm, wait and see. But all the risks are to the downside. What I mean by that is, let's think in the future. Is life going to be much better than we thought, or worse than we thought? And the danger is that it's going to be worse. But good news, markets are up. People's investments and stocks that they own and pensions that they own have been boosted back up again. I'm looking at the figure on your screen. The Dow Jones is up 7% in the last few hours, but it was down many percent before that. So what's going to happen tomorrow? What stupid stuff is he going to say tomorrow that which will crash the markets again? So you've learned that the Prime Minister, the President of the United States, probably has to keep pretty quiet for a while because markets are going to respond to every stupid thing that he says.
Well, that's probably not possible, is it, to be fair? I think you're quite right in terms of we'll probably hear from him tomorrow.
We'll be talking in 48 hours again.
Well, Danny, we may well speak this time tomorrow. Be on standby.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, listen, Danny, really good to get your analysis. And as I said, it may not be tomorrow, it may be the day after that, but we will talk very soon because, as you said, there is more to come.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Danny. Well, let's remind you of what President Trump had to say a little earlier this hour and bring you up to speed.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents. They wouldn't have done it. and it had to be done. What was happening to us on trade, not only with, you know, if you look at it, not only with China, but China was by far the biggest abuser in history, and others also, but somebody had to do it. They had to stop because it was not sustainable. Last year, China made $1 trillion off trade with the United States. That's not right. And now I've reversed it. It's for a short period of time, but we made $2 billion. We're making now $2 billion a day. And somebody had to do it. Roger actually said it. Charles Schwab was here a little while ago, one of the great financial people, and he said he's been waiting for 40 years for somebody to do what I did over the last month. And if you didn't do it, you wouldn't have a country. It wouldn't be sustainable. So I'm honored to have done it. And, you know, look, nothing's over yet, but we have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries, including China. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. You know, it's one of those things they don't know how quite. They're proud people. And President Xi's a proud man. I know him very well. And they don't know quite how to go about it, but they'll figure it out. They're in the process of figuring it out, but they want to make a deal. And we have many other countries, as you know, many more than 75, and they all want to come, and they want to come here, or they'll go to Commerce, or they'll go to Treasury. We have our great senators here and congressmen. They'll call John, they'll do somebody, they'll go through somebody, but they're all calling, how do we do this? They all want to make a deal. Somebody had to do what we did, and I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate. So we'll see how it all works out. I think it's going to work out amazing. I think that our country is going to be at the end of a year or shorter, but I think we're going to have something that nobody would have dreamt possible. A man like Roger Penske, I don't want to get him in trouble with China, so I won't, but he would know that you have to, someday you have to cut the bow and you have to do what you have to do, right, Roger? And that's what I did, and I'm very happy to have done it.
Mr. President,
was there anyone
the Prime Minister of Greece just told Breitbart's Matt Boyle that he thinks absolutely the European Union and the United States could work out a trade deal that's win-win and, quote, mutually beneficial to both sides. What do you think about the Prime Minister's comments, and do you think a deal could be struck with the European Union?
First of all, I know him. He's a good man, and I appreciate his comments. Yeah, a deal can be made with every one of them. A deal's going to be made with China. A deal's going to be made with every one of them. And there'll be fair deals. I just want fair. They will be fair deals for everybody.
Speak now to Bob Davis, former senior editor of the Wall Street Journal. And you heard it there from the president himself. It's going to work out amazing. What do you think?
I wouldn't use the word amazing. I mean, he retreated to some degree, and that's a good thing because the tariffs were going to, damage enormously the United States and a lot of the rest of the world. But we got to remember, we're still in a big trade war between the United States and China. Those 10% tariffs are in there for 90 days. 10% is 10% more than there was, a week or so ago. So we're still in the midst of a big fight.
The president's Treasury Secretary said this reversal had nothing to do with the market's reaction. But I don't know if you heard my interview with the professor of economics there, Danny Blanchflower, a little while ago. He said the markets stop, people doing stupid things. Is that essentially what's happened here?
Yeah, I think, the Treasury Secretary may have said that, but the president himself said that the markets were the reason that he moved. The markets were getting yippy, as he said. And he also said he was
golf term there, the yips.
Yeah. So, I don't think there's any doubt of what happened here.
And you talk about this big trade war with China. The tariffs going up to over 100% for China, but he's confident they could do a deal. He says China just don't quite know how to do it yet. Who would win in a trade war between America and China if it came to that?
Well, the easy answer is nobody wins in a trade war, and that's true. China,
that's the politician's answer, isn't it?
Right, it is. But it is also true, actually. But, no, China is way more vulnerable than the United States is to a trade war. It's much more dependent on trade than the United States. But the United States will lose also. I mean, the cost of iPhones, electronics, toys, you name it, is going to go up in the United States. That's a loss. But China is definitely, on the shorter end when it comes to fighting on trade.
Yeah. How easy will they be to negotiate with?
They won't be easy. The last time in the first Trump administration with much, much lower tariffs, which at the time seemed to be enormous, it took them 2 years. So I think we're in for a long fight. I think the question is whether he'll pause, the tariffs or reduce the tariffs or do something, as the negotiations, first of all, if they start and how they continue, because the markets will react to an enormous trade war with the United States and China. They did the last time. It's just a relief that it's not a trade war at the moment with the rest of the world.
Yeah, China being very much treated as an outlier in all of this. There is this 10% tariff subjected to all other countries. That's going to be universal. We had a quote from number 10 here, the Prime Minister in the UK saying, a trade war is in nobody's interest, as you said there. We don't want any tariffs at all. I mean, all countries will be thinking that. How likely is it? What kind of deals are going to come out of this when it's all done and dusted?
Well, it's hard to know. I mean, it is possible, that, the optimist view is the U.S. and Europe and the U.S. and the U.K. were already negotiating or talking about negotiating deals. It's possible you could get, tariff reductions on both sides. Possible you could get some agreement on digital taxes and all kinds of other issues about services. There's lots to talk about. You really just don't know. But as I say, there's 10% tariffs. That's 10% more than there was before. So if you bring it down to the retail version, that's maybe 3-4%. So that's a hit to inflation in the United States and a hit to earnings and so on. So still significant, but not nearly as rough as it seemed to be, 5 hours ago.
Yeah, and markets surging off the back of those announcements from the White House a few hours ago. The gist is going to continue, though, because as we've been saying this evening, you just don't know what President Trump's going to say from one day to the next. So there's this pause, not just for tariffs, but for these sort of tumultuous times that we've been having. But we don't know how long that's going to be for.
Oh, my God. With President Trump, you can be sure of one thing. It will remain tumultuous. That is the way he operates. So, yes, there's a pause. People are happy at the moment, but there'll be something tomorrow. It is the way the guy operates. It's the way he operated the first term. It's the way he's operated even more so this term.
And Bob, just a final word for how this translates to the people watching our show tonight, how these tariffs actually affect people in their everyday lives. It takes a while to trickle down, but there is a real-world effect to what we're discussing tonight.
Oh, sure. Well, if you look at the 10% tariffs, as I say, so figure sort of half of that gets, makes its way down to the retail level, and you're talking about, everything the United States imports. And then when it comes to China, 100% tariffs are high enough to stop trade with China. You can make them 300%. It wouldn't make much of a difference. At some point, trade stops. Now, that's enormously important for American consumers because we get so much of, what we consume from China. But so if you're China, what do? They've talked about retaliation. They, certainly are retaliating. That's another hit. But also, what happens is the gap. So we're talking now 125% tariffs on China and 10% on everyone else. So if you're a Chinese businessman, what exactly are you going to do? You're going to send your stuff directly to the United States? I don't think so. They're really smart. And what they'll do is they'll look for a third country to ship their stuff through and basically challenge the Customs Department to find, to be able to track it. And Customs is hugely outmanned when it comes to it. In the first trade war, basically what happened was many Chinese entrepreneurs moved to Vietnam or moved some production to Vietnam or shipped through Vietnam. And Vietnam was the big winner of the first trade war. The incentive now is to do that times 10. And so I think you'll see a lot of that as well. A lot of China trying to get around, Chinese companies trying to get around what is essentially a trade blockade by the United States.
Yeah, looking for the loopholes. And Bob Davis, fascinating to talk to you this evening and get your insight. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
Let's bring in our economics and business correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan. Gurpreet, quite the evening. Big changes coming very fast. What's been the impact so far?
Yeah, it's been quite the rollercoaster, hasn't it, SJ? Well, let's just start from the beginning. Well, not from the beginning, but let's start from when let's start from when we first saw significant turmoil in the financial markets. Let's start from Liberation Day last Wednesday. Trump announced sweeping tariffs on countries across the world, and stock markets immediately responded. They plummeted, not just in the US, but here in the UK, across Europe, across Asia. And investors were giving Donald Trump's tariffs policy a clear vote of no confidence. The fear was that this would decimate economic growth across the world. And we saw the NASDAQ, as you can see up there, the technology-heavy index in the US plummet as a result, as did the S&P 500, and so did the Dow Jones. And that strain that we saw in the financial markets, it started to spread, not just from stocks.
Gurpreet, I'm just going to have to interrupt you there because Donald Trump is coming into our programme again. We'll probably hear more from him about the subject you were talking about there, these tariffs. He's signing executive orders in the Oval Office.